Greetings all. It's a pleasure to be here and to hear about this wonderful launch that's going to appear today. So before we get into the program, I want to introduce, as you all probably know, Dr. Krishna Vista, who is the Senior Executive Vice President and Head of STAR Publications and reigning from Morgan State University. I also want to give greetings to our Director of Publications, Dr. Roy Chan, who is reigning from Lee University. And then myself, I'm just going to give introduction and lead into this discussion. And my name is Patricia Timmons, and I am the Associate Director of Publications at Star Scholars. So the agenda today, we're just going to briefly go over the publication of Star Scholars and then go over to the book overview, which will be led by Tom Milliton. So he will go over all the wonderful work and the wonderful authors in this book, and he will go through all of these items in the agenda, and then we'll end it with Q&As. So just to give you a background, the Star Scholars, we are a global grassroots organization that builds community of scholars to support their research and scholarship across the disciplines and borders. As a nonprofit organization based in Maryland, we offer a wide range of programs and services to support scholars. More importantly, we are an organization, and I will stress again that we build communities that support the advancement of new generation of scholars working across borders. So please feel free to share your ideas and initiatives to collaborate with us. Star Scholars is for students, faculty, and staff in institutions. We build programs based on your needs and requests. So please check out our website. My colleagues will place that in the chat to learn about the existing programs for graduate students and faculty, and even membership options. So we represent across the globe with a registered members more than 15,000 from diverse institutions and countries. In our workload at Star Scholars Press, we house several professional journals across the disciplines. So you will see our workload where you see 3,500 plus manuscripts per year, over 4,000 reviewers, 17,000 subscribers, and 600 libraries. So our editorial team process a lot, and we work hard at Star Scholars Press. And again, we actively work, so you will see our forthcoming titles here, where it's the contemporary issues, and you can see all 4 books. So please check that out soon. They will be released soon. So again, if you are interested, you are an interested scholar, I encourage you and implore you to review our submission guidelines and send your queries to the editorial team. We are willing to collaborate with all of you, and we are here to work together to build community. So at this time, I would like to turn it over to Tom Milliton, who and he was going to talk about the wonderful work that his team and other scholars have presented in this wonderful book release. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Timmons. I appreciate that introduction. Before I go on, I want to thank Krishna, Roy, and Bo for all the support and really making this thing happen. I think they do all the work unheralded behind the scenes, and they make this job look easy. So thank you very much. We tackled the question, we often have thought about what exactly is international education? What does it mean? What does it represent? And more importantly, where is it going? And so we thought we would ask some experts. And so we've asked some leading thought leaders in the field to contribute their thoughts, share their experience, and tell us really where exactly international education is headed. They have a combined 330 years of experience in international experience, so they really don't become more well-informed than that. So we're really pleased with the wealth of knowledge that they bring to the table, and certainly their insight. So if you look at the book, it spans quite a few areas, Gary Rhodes, for example, will give a nice history of the field and then make a connection to Olympism. I won't list everything, and then Bill Smithy talks about how over his nearly 50-year career he has seen the field expand and grow in many different ways. And then even we have Lance Kenny talking a little bit about quantum theory. So I think there's some really interesting tidbits here for you. And we don't want this to be a typical, well, what is study abroad? We want to take a look at it under a different light, from different perspectives, and just keep the momentum thinking about what exactly this field is and where it will go. Thank you. So for the introduction, I wrote the introduction for this book, and rather than just repeat what I wrote verbatim, I thought I'd put these two quotes up here for you to see, which I like because they do touch upon an aspect of international education, especially the one by Ann Carson, because in many ways we have mythologized international education. In a way, it's like a sacred cow that no one really likes to criticize or engage in constructive criticism or debate. So I really like that. What I'm going to do, as I said, instead of reading my introduction entirely, I'm just going to pose 3 questions and some sub-questions, and I want you to bear them in mind as our authors speak, because they are the true superstars here. It's not me. I'm just trying to shine the light on them. So the question I have is, what is international education? Is it an achievable myth, or is it a far-flung reality? What exactly is it? Do they have some beliefs that are more sacred than others? And by that, I'm meaning STEM versus humanities, which is a debate that's going on in the field. Does it have a historiography? Or is it a political movement? Or, as the environmentalist Rachel Carson once observed, is it a cause without an end? We don't really know. We're so tied up in doing it and practicing it. We don't really see how far ahead in the future, what form it will take and what it will do. My next question is what is the philosophy of international education? What motivates it? What guides it? Is it immutable, or does it change with the times? That, for me, is a key question. Does it change with the times, or are there certain aspects of it, characteristics that do not change? That's something I'd like to see. And one thing I have thought about is, does its outcomes are the outcomes of international education subverted by its aspirations? In other words, are we aiming too high? So these again are just some things to consider. And I'll end with what are the core values of international education? A Scottish philosopher by the name of William McCaskill wrote about value lock-ins, and he defines them as systems of values that persist for an extremely long time. So my question, I guess, would be to the authors here and to you, the audience: what are those values of international education that are going to hopefully persist for a long time, certainly well beyond our lifespans? For me, I think one of the things I like about international education is the activist role that it can take, and we're seeing some of this now with the anti-racism movement. There's two examples that I like. 1963, we had 59 Columbia University undergraduate students defy the Kennedy administration's travel ban on Cuba by traveling to that country from Prague. I think that's brilliant. And then more recently, in 2006, Dr. James Skelly from Brethren Colleges Abroad challenged and actually rattled former Secretary of State Colin Powell at the 2006 NAFTA conference, the annual conference in Minneapolis. And I think that is brilliant. That is what international education for me is. It's not about just educating, but advocating and supporting, challenging. I think those for me are important values of what international education is all about. So I'll end here. The contributors to this book will be adding a new light, shining a new light on international education, and they want to compel you, they want to prompt you to reconsider what international education is. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. And Tom, Star Scholars, the entire team, thank you for allowing me to be a part of this amazing project. And also, warmest congratulations to all of my colleagues. I'm so excited to be here with you, to hear your thoughts, to engage and learn from you. By way of introduction, Sora Friedman. I am a professor of international and global education at SIT Graduate Institute. Our primary campus and administrative offices are based in Brattleboro, Vermont. However, our learning happens all over the globe. And I know we have several people calling in from Nepal. I was talking with a colleague in Kathmandu this morning. I have a group of graduate students at Yantra House at the SIT Center there this semester. So Nepal is very much a part of my life right now. I am based in Shepherdstown, West Virginia, just down the road from Morgan in Baltimore. I grew up 10 minutes from the Morgan campus, and I'm so happy to be here. My work involves serving as chair of 2 master's programs. I teach, I advise master's and doctoral students in international and global education. My current research and practice areas of interest are really always around supporting rising professionals in the field. And Tom, so many of the questions that you just posed are things I am talking about constantly with my students. I was writing about advocacy just this morning as well. I also have a deep interest in supporting women leaders in the field because research shows that women leaders have not achieved the same levels of success as men leaders. There's a lot of work to do there. And I'm very honored to be writing a column bi-monthly now for Global Ed, which is an online space dedicated to the democratization of our field by having a lot of open access materials. It's called Practicing International Education. So I really launched into the question, what's different today than when I started? February was my 40th anniversary working in the field. And I've been thinking about how different the milieu is from when I studied abroad in the early 1980s and started working in 1984. At that time, it was impossible to earn a master's degree in international education. You could only earn something in a related field, area, or language studies, political science, international relations. And this is really important now. There are 15, 20, even more master's degrees in international education and a growing number of doctorates as well. And that's a real reflection of the professionalization of our field. The skills and theory that I studied some 40 years ago were largely around intercultural training as well, especially with high school exchange programs, study abroad for me from the United States, since that's where I studied, going out into the world, and more corporate settings. So then I think, what does this mean for us today? Well, I'm always sharing with my students that they need to have a variety of knowledge and skills, strong theoretical groundings, and then, of course, in our field and at SIT, we talk about practical application, advocacy, management, professional writing, flexibility, compliance, health, safety, security, crisis management. It's all a big bubble together. Attention to detail, and again, especially because research shows it continues to be an issue, self-confidence of women who are working in the field. I think that the biggest challenge is also the biggest constant, and that is that change is pervasive. The only way we are going to stay current is to keep up with change, to embrace it, to process it, to learn from it. And as I've reached my 4th decade in the field, I am constantly reminding myself of this. And it gets harder the older I get, I must admit. We have got to keep moving forward in inclusive and fair ways. So one example of change, and Michael Smithy and I were emailing about this. Michael, thank you so much for your comment. It was around the use of technology and how it relates to the degree to which today's students are not allowed to disconnect from home and be in their home culture, just to be and have a life there. So I studied abroad in 1982-83, my junior year in Bogota, Colombia. I spent 10 months there. There was no expectation of contact with my family beyond letters, which took 10 days to 2 weeks to arrive. Over the course of that 10 months, I spoke to my family twice for 5 minutes each, and I'm incredibly close with them. I knew they'd find me in case of emergency, but that year I was in Colombia, focused on being in Bogota. I lived with a Colombian family. All of my classes, other than Spanish language grammar, were with Colombian students in Colombian universities. I sang in a Colombian choir. Most of my friends were Colombian. When I started teaching at SIT, we could still teach our graduate students then to encourage their future participants to leave technology behind. But today, I think about how students would react if they knew that they could not speak with their families and friends for months at a time once they left home. How would their parents react? Would they even agree? Students and families and parents, would they even agree to such an experience? The ability to connect easily and cheaply with loved ones is so pervasive, and it frightens me because it denies the opportunity to completely immerse oneself in a new culture and community. Even Peace Corps volunteers connect with home today in ways that were unheard of 20 or 30 years ago. So, what does this mean for IE professionals? Our job to encourage deep and meaningful engagement across difference is so much harder now to facilitate. That challenge has shifted from how to keep students off of their devices to how to promote learning in spite of or even through students' devices, which still presents its own challenges. So one more thing to consider are the changes in the field, which are so many, but also successes. I think about these a lot as well. The field has professionalized, as I talked about, peer-reviewed research that informs our practice, so many opportunities for training and professional development, an incredibly large global network like we're seeing today. There's still so much work to do, but now we are also actively questioning assumptions that were held for decades, especially in the United States. We work consciously to bridge divides across identities, not just around race, gender, and socioeconomics, but also around family status, student status, physical and intellectual abilities. Today, we are assuming, we should be assuming, that anyone can have an experience abroad and can learn across difference. It is incumbent upon us as IE professionals to figure out how to make it happen. So I'll leave with one last thought. It is corny, I think, but we are one world, 200 nations, thousands of cultures. The need for people to be able to live together is not going to change. It's more pervasive than ever. So it's more incumbent upon us as professionals, as teachers, scholars, and practitioners to always keep in mind why we do what we do, to cherish and grow the joy that we feel when learning and self-awareness happen, when connection happens. And we need to support those in the future who will consider our lived experiences as their histories. Doing so will help them to find their niches, to make their impacts, and to contribute to global peace and understanding. So with this call for us to always look forward, I thank you, and I look forward to hearing from my colleagues. Thank you so much. I should have said over to you, Michael. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. You know, when Tom first raised this idea, I thought, well, veterans is a euphemism for old geezers, really. And I thought one route into this would be to think of the afflictions that beset us old geezers, like lumbago, amnesia. And the one that struck me is nostalgia. And nostalgia is that emotion by which we look back at things that very often didn't happen and miss them. And educators are particularly beset by this delusion, I think, because we believe that things were better then, whenever then was, than they are now. So we have a kind of Eden syndrome. And at somewhere or other, we still believe that we were the scholastic generation. We read books, we did this and that. And our students don't do that anymore. So what we've done is create the myth of a generation. And we've called it Generation XYZ, the young and so forth, and invested it with stereotypes that are very negative. So we say they don't read stuff, they can't concentrate, blah, blah, blah. Now, I'm a child of the 1960s, and I can tell you my generation was far, far away from the standards of the current generation. We couldn't actually find our shoes very often. And our students go and do internships, and they occasionally turn up to class as well, with something we never did. So I want to firstly undermine that notion that there is a decline in scholasticism, a decline in curiosity and in consciousness. Some things have changed, of course, I don't deny that. And Sora mentioned professionalization. And of course, you know, that is a very positive thing. If there's any minor downside to that, is that when we came into this field, there was no such thing as a field, actually. We came from different disciplines, and there was a certain richness in that. You know, my first degree in alchemy may not have been terribly, terribly relevant, but it did mean that we had a kind of consciousness of diverse thought. Health and safety, of course, another thing. Slightly worrying thing about health and safety is if we extend the idea of safety to include intellectual safety, we're in a very difficult area, because what the idea, the coddling of the American mind is a good book about this, actually. The idea that we should defend students from disturbance is counter-educational, of course. Other things that I don't like, I sound like Jeremiah moaning here, but I don't feel totally negative all the time. The rhetoric that we use, hyperbole, exaggerations, unachievable aspirations, a thing called global citizenship. I've written something about this in the past, but then we say things like study abroad changed my life, which on the surface is a very good thing, except that it isn't. I changed my life in the active voice by studying abroad is a very positive thing to say. Study abroad changed my life mystifies the idea of abroad, is passive, and takes learning away from the student participant. Abroad will change you. We all know that's not true. I spent 3 years in Italy and learned absolutely nothing, but that's autobiography. You don't want to hear that. Then we also tell students, education abroad will give you a financial step up when you begin your career. Nonsense. We all know this is not. Any old Marxist will tell you class is critical here. Students do not start from a place of creativity, of equality, sorry. Where you studied, what's your background, those are determining factors, at least much more so than the accident of having studied abroad, I think. You can talk about athletics also gives you a start in life. And much more to say. One more thing about the culture emphasis that bothers me. I think we've, over the years, bought into the fact that cultural studies, cross-cultural studies are at the heart of what we do. And I do believe it's a mistake, a kind of weakness. Because what we do is take students from country to country. Countries are not the same as cultures. We all know that. The only people in the world who believe that the country and cultures align are ultranationalists who believe that people like me can undermine the purity of their culture. Neo-fascists believe it. And by implication, so do we. And that kind of alliance is not one I'm very happy about. Two other thoughts then. Tom mentioned, and then I really will finish. Tom mentioned the denigration of the humanities. And it's critical here. On the one hand, we talk about wanting to decolonize curriculum. And then we allow the denigration of those disciplines that are critical to the process of decolonizing curriculum. That is history and literature, discovering hidden histories, unearthing, the archaeology of unearthing lost voices. And finally, my last real worry, and I haven't got time to say nice things. If you want to find out, you might have to read the chapter, sadly. There's a narrative of benefits that's changed inexorably, and we almost didn't notice it happening. What we now see as a benefit is that education abroad separates students who participate from the lumpen rest. it gives them an advantage. Instead of breaking down barriers, which was where we started thinking, the barriers between young people across countries that are political, linguistic, social, emotional, we're reconstructing barriers. So we've brought into a kind of neocon delusion, I believe, and it disrupts and distorts the ideals that we need to get back towards, at least in the rhetoric of what we do, and we have to start to mean them. So from an old geezer perspective, if you like, this emphasis on personal benefits, personal gains ain't good. And if you want to hear more about it, you'll actually have to read my scribblings. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. We will now turn it over to Gary and Lisa.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Lisa Loberg, and I'm so delighted to be here with you today and excited to share about our chapter that really reflects on the past, present, and future of study abroad. And I think many of us here can agree that it has been a challenging, but also a very rewarding road. For this chapter, we focus on the remarkable trajectory of study abroad, starting with the growth in student participation over the past several decades. We look at operations and the evolution of study abroad offices, the professionalism of the field, and it is truly remarkable to see how it has progressed over time. Many of us here probably know firsthand the experience of even starting a study abroad office, the joy of creating it from the ground up. And we may also recall the constant struggle of having to make the case for its existence, trying to do it all as a one-person office, finally making progress, and ultimately seeing its expansion. Study abroad in whatever configuration or name is displayed on the door, international programs, global learning, it now has a place among the other offices on a campus. Study abroad opportunities and faculty-led programs are featured in admissions materials. Participation stats often find their way into the speeches of college presidents. And we're proud of this progress. It is gratifying to see how study abroad has evolved, how technology has made our world smaller and more connected, how institutions have devoted attention to campus internationalization with partnerships and collaborations around the world. We do take pride in the professionalism and the sharing of best practices in so many areas, including program design, student support, health and safety, pre-departure preparation, re-entry. The measurement of study abroad's impact on student learning, on college retention, and on student careers. And even Congress managed to agree on something in declaring 2006 the year of study abroad. And yet, while so much has flourished, many barriers, both real and perceived, still prevent more students from participating. And we must continue to expand access and ensure all students have a clear path to these experiences. And there are new sets of challenges which we must navigate and overcome, and which continue to require innovative thinking. So I'll pause there and I'll hand it over to my co-author, Gary Rhodes. Thanks.
Thanks, Lisa. When I got into the field in 1989 to continue, study abroad offices, as Lisa mentioned, were many one-person offices, isolated islands on a college campus. And that resulted in some staff who didn't really have a comprehensive background of best practices in university administration, student affairs best practices, and health and safety. Following a number of highly publicized incidents through RE health and safety, there became an increased focus on the field on some of these issues, with a greater connection to other organizations like NASPA, which focuses on student affairs, led by Roger Ludeman at the time, and a focus on health and safety, with groups coming together across the field, connecting to the State Department, Overseas Security Advisory Council, and the state adding academia to their purview, and regular U.S. and international health and safety workshops, with NAFSA, Forum on Education Abroad, and other international organizations providing resources and support in the area. Whereas there was no full-time study abroad health and safety folks in the field at the end of the 80s, And now there's over 100 representatives of a group called Pulse, representing full-time health and safety support on campuses. We've navigated a global pandemic in the field. Study abroad students were brought back in spring 2020 because of COVID-19. These health and safety people helped bring these people back effectively, but the field actually came to a close in a certain sense as COVID-19 stopped study abroad. Although it resulted in virtual study abroad, and I'll talk about that in a minute as well. Looking at expanding the impact of study abroad, research has shown that study abroad has a positive impact on international learning as well as student retention and success. We have a greater number of people in the field that have doctoral degrees, so we have more practitioners that also have capacity to do research. We've been looking at the impact of student international travel on climate change, so looking at the potential of that negative impact. Some institutions are looking at being carbon neutral, but I think the important thing is that we look at the importance of study abroad when we do send students abroad on making a difference for those students significant, as well as making an impact on the UN Sustainable Development Goals. And we find a growth in the field on looking at those connections between the study abroad field, student learning, and the UN SDGs. This includes a relatively new organization called CANI and the Forum on Education Abroad and other organizations providing guidance and even adding awards for institutions integrating an impact on the UN SDGs in their study abroad programs. One of the issues we talk about is expanding collaboration. Sometimes in the field we talk to ourselves, which is great, but maybe we're not talking as much as we can to others. Since 2012 Olympics in London, I've been working on increasing collaboration between the study abroad field and the Olympic movement, as well as other high-impact international athletic events. There's actually a higher ed association called FISU, the International University Sports Federation, that brings university athletes together, and their Healthy Campus program focuses on supporting the UN SDGs. What's surprising is that that organization in the study abroad field really hasn't connected that well. So that's another opportunity for making an impact. The Olympic movement has a clear connection to the UN SDGs. The United Nations has actually made statements on how sports and the Olympics make a significant impact, as well as the Olympic Values Education Program, connecting resources and ideals to schools and education. And every 2 years, over 25% of the world's population watches, whether it's on site or at home on the internet and on TV. This summer, with the Summer Olympic and Paralympic Games taking place in Paris, there's an opportunity for international educators to connect the ideals and values we have in study abroad to those in the Olympic movement. We conclude by reflecting on the study abroad world of the future. With the current global conflicts and climate changes and other challenges facing the world, the study abroad field has made an impact, but that impact can grow, whether it's on students or on the world at large. COVID-19 did expand opportunities to see that virtual study abroad, doing international learning in home, can make an impact as well, with AI and all the apps that are out there and other online resources and teaching at home, abroad, and after coming back. We can make a greater impact on students through intensifying these efforts along with the international travel that takes place in study abroad. We hope you enjoy our chapter when you get a chance to read it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Gary and Lisa. We will now turn it over to Joshua.
Good morning or good afternoon. Hello, wherever you are. Thanks for having me. Thanks really to Star Scholars Network. Krishna, it's good to see you again. And Roy, we've published together before. And this project was really exceptional. I'm looking at the screen. I'm seeing some old friends. I'm seeing Mike Smithy, who I've known since I was a student at Syracuse University many years ago. In fact, I see a Phi Beta Delta medallion behind you, Mike. And Mike presented me mine when I got back from study abroad. I didn't even know what it was, but he gave it to me and I've kept it. And Mike Wolf, long colleague with the CA Kappa organization. And of course, Tom Millington. So Tom approached me about joining this project, and I echo the others. We can be veteran, but I don't feel so old. But when I counted the years since Tom and I studied abroad together, it was staggering, and I lost count. But Tom Millington is my good friend, and not only that, but we studied abroad together and we're roommates together in a host family. Do we remember when students lived in host families? And we had no choice in that matter. And we met, we weren't friends before, but we became not just lifelong friends, but now colleagues in this field. So Tom, when you asked me to write a chapter, I said yes right away. I wouldn't have said no, but it was an exercise to think about this field, where it's been, where it's going. My chapter is called Walls and Doors, to each their time. And I'm reflecting on the metaphor really of the door, particularly the opening door that so many of us use. And of course, our open doors report is our data source. A study abroad legend who led the program that we were on back in Spain called himself Willie the Doorman, El Portero. So this metaphor of the door, and we've, I think, embraced that for a long time, is there. But there are others, and I've been thinking about this more and more, and that's hence the title, Walls and Doors. There are walls too. There are literal border walls. There are electronic cyber walls that prevent information from passing. And of course, there are walls of legislatures that are scaled by extremists. And there are walls really of ignorance around us. So it's not just doors that we're facing, but it's walls. And I reflected on one of my favorite poems, and I included that in my chapter, a Seamus Heaney poem called Scaffolding, where one friend is talking to another about a wall, and there had been scaffolding put up to build that wall. And I thought that was a nice comparison to our work. The wall endures, the scaffolding need not endure, but what matters is that the wall endures. That's a good use of the wall metaphor. And perhaps we are that scaffolding, right? We're the ones who keep this going. We're the ones who have devoted our careers to it, whether we're remembered or not, whether we need to be or not. We're the ones who kept it going. I didn't share my background, but I've been in this field. In fact, my first job was in 1994, so it'll be 30 years this fall. I'm now the senior international officer at SUNY Oswego in upstate New York. I worked at Syracuse University a few years before that. And I've done my best to be a scholar practitioner along the way. But thinking about this project, really, I feel as much like a survivor as anything else, a survivor in this field. We did face the pandemic this past few years, which, if we didn't imagine walls before, literally being told by your government that you cannot travel, I guess that's a pretty big wall, right? But in reality, before that, we faced financial crises, we faced wars, 9/11 in the United States and the subsequent wars, going back to my undergrad days, Pan Am Flight 103, which was a seminal moment in our field. And I was a freshman at Syracuse when that happened. And in memories of the Cold War, which are not so old anymore. And when we grew up in the Cold War, we knew there were places that we couldn't go, or just frankly wouldn't go, right? And we're seeing that, I think, unfortunately, returning. So my chapter, if you would read it, one of the things I talk about is remember the era that you're in. Remember the era that we're in. There are times, honestly, looking back, when we were opening doors. There were times when the New York Times declared this the study abroad generation. And now there are times when I think, do students even understand what this endeavor is? We have to re-explain it to them. We have to, yes, talk about its value, but also talk about it's fun, and it is something you can do. And yes, you can take your selfies and post your videos on Instagram and TikTok, but you're going to be somewhere doing that. You're not just going to be doing it in front of a green screen. So my end thought is that sometimes the glass is half full, and we should take it when it's half full, because it may not be. A governmental change, something beyond our control, may restrict us. It was earlier mentioned about Cuba policy, and that's a real good example, right? That has come and gone and come and gone. And I think that it's a good opportunity to remember that when you work at a university and you are, regardless of how professional the field has become, and it has, we have to remember that universities themselves, we are organizations bound by risk, by demands, by politics, by money, frankly, by limited knowledge and exposure that many people have, including people that we report to. And so at times we have to keep this scaffolding going. There are times we have to be persistent. Sometimes we have to be active. Sometimes we have to be incredibly entrepreneurial and just ride that juggernaut. Other times we have to be subversive, and we have to keep this going, because if we don't, no one else will. So I conclude there. I would be delighted if you read my chapter and wanted to communicate about it further. I am eternally optimistic, and I take that glass half full any day, and I look forward to the days when it's entirely full again. Thank you very much. I think I am introducing the next speaker now, Michael Smithy. Mike, you're up next. Mike Smithy.
My icon for the speaker wasn't on. Okay. Thank you very much. I'm more than delighted to be a part of this book and its authors. Have read almost all of the articles, and I find the knowledge and the approaches to be galvanizing. It's not often that we have people who have been part of a field for so long to be able to replicate their thinking about what's happened. And I find that this is very, very important for those who come after us, because most of the time, people today are more in the present than they are in the past. And I think that the past has a lot to offer, much as our fathers and grandfathers would say to us, well, you got to study the past in order to figure out the future, but that's not always the case. At any rate, I'd like to walk you through some of the thinking that I have engaged in and events that I've engaged in over the past nearly 50 years that I've been part of the international education, which actually started in my graduate years at Florida State University, and in which I attended the NAFSA conference in 1970 in Kansas City, which was my first engagement with a big group of people who were like-minded. And from there, I had a hiatus, and then I really started my professional career in 1976 at Syracuse University, and stayed there for 30 years. That's out of the pall, I suppose, to do something like that for 30 years and then say, oh, it's time to go. And because my wife moved to another place, so I moved with her. But I didn't stop, and so I'm still here after some 18 more years and so on. One of the things that I reflected on in my chapter was the importance of the 1960s as a galvanizing trend toward what LBJ would call the Great Society at that time. And he had the Voting Rights Act and the Civil Rights Act, and the triumvirate was ended by the International Education Act of 1966. And while that was passed by Congress, all three were passed by Congress, the International Education Act was not funded. because the Vietnam War took precedence and the funding went to that. So I'm left wondering what would have happened if the IEA 66 been implemented. It's likely that international education would have had a seat at the higher education table earlier rather than later. But what would that have meant? And I'm still nonplussed with that because I think that because the act was not funded, that action did not play out as intended. And I'll get to that in a moment. But I would say that from 1966 to the early 90s, international education found a way forward individually and as groups through collaborating, advocating, and strengthening together. And we often used crisis to gain attention, which I'll come to. At the national level, attacks on international education by Congress, like the Fulbright program, were often defeated largely through advocacy by NAFSA and other international education member organizations. At the institutional level, it was crises that established the consequences of running counter to the trend. For example, the retrenchment and the Asian financial crisis that led institutions to reconsider the role and further articulate the international dimensions of the institution. One example I use is the value of the dollar was lost if the pipeline of international education students dried up. And by the way, I was more on the international education student side than on the study abroad side, but I did have a lot of connection with my colleagues and did debriefings of returning study abroad students and so on. But with the idea of the pipeline of international students and the dollars associated with that, I really didn't like using that method because I felt there were intellectual and educational reasons for retaining and increasing international students and the international commitment to the international education. But an interesting sidebar to these events was that between 1990 and 2010, members of the staff with doctorates increased significantly. And along with this, from the early 90s to the present, research and publication on issues of internationalization, curriculum, advocacy, as well as more refined definitions guided our actions and significantly expanded our message. Along with this, there was the establishment of a professionalization of members of the field. This now also includes similar organizations to NAFSA in Europe, South America, Australia, and Asia. This also led to a focus on definitions. IEA 66 was more a generator of policy decisions, of providing graduates of higher education with tools to aid in the U.S. managing the world systems. That was the kind of thinking that was going on in the 50s and 60s. But by 2000, this focus on knowledge had changed HEIs to involve a process for doing so. Jane Knight, as we all know, articulated that, and she's from Canada. Currently, the definition of internationalization includes the concept of intentionality to the process, which Hans de Wit's articulated for the European segment. However, it was the unintentional events that galvanized international education in my mind, and these actions, along with the crises of the 1990s and the growing number of international students seeking study in the U.S., began to set the stage for changing institutional approaches to international education. This resulted in such positions as the senior international officers being appointed to upper-level positions in the administration. And with that began the seat at the table. And that was interesting because the seat at the table was what we all wanted from the time I began until the early 2000s. So while international education doesn't look the same as the IEA might have intended, international education has evolved and established its global worth. And the term international educator, confirmed by NASA in the change of its name in 1989, today many people in the field call themselves international educators. Just last May at the NASA conference, I found more and more people saying, my name is blah, blah, and I'm an international educator. And that didn't happen 50 years ago. In fact, 50 years ago, I don't think we thought of ourselves as educators at all. But now we're beginning to think of that. In addition to administration and faculty and so on, we are educators. Since my tenure began in international organization, many in the U.S. and abroad have strengthened their focus and commitment on the international education, as have governments, stakeholders. Technology has been a critical force in fostering these types of growth, such as virtual education and mobility, so on. Thank you, Sarah, for mentioning that issue about immersion and technology. So, in closing, I'd say that our knowledge of the field has increased, research and publications, and we have gained more legitimacy through Star Scholars, Sage, Rutledge, and others. I thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Just want to give a reminder, let's try to keep it within 3 to 5 minutes so we can hear from all scholars in this wonderful edition. Thank you. And I will now turn it over to Heidi and Martin.
Good morning, everyone. So nice to see all of you. A family reunion of sorts. I appreciate the opportunity to have been able to work with Marty on this chapter and for this book. And we will keep it short, particularly because I have another meeting at the top of the hour. So I'm sorry to talk and then depart. Our chapter is entitled Changing Narratives. This chapter reminded me of something that Barack Obama said when he was leaving office. And he said, my words of wisdom to all of you is that life is not linear. It is a series of spirals. And we must take each opportunity, make the most of it, launch things forward wherever they're starting from, and not assume that we're going in a single linear direction. Marty and I took this opportunity for this chapter to look at 2 different ways of reflecting on study abroad and thinking about where it's going. Marty's section is entitled A Bird's Eye View, and he looks at international education from the organizations that were present when he entered the field in 1976 for his career, and talks about Fulbright, Forum, NAFSA, and all that they have done to professionalize our organization, to help guide concepts of cross-cultural integration and communication, and to also look at how do we take these concepts, these very important ideas and growth opportunities, and channel them into career strategies, career opportunities, and ways to be more thoughtful in the workplace for young people. And I'm sure Marty will follow up. I'll do my short share and then turn it over to Marty. And I think this is an incredibly important topic and so relevant for all of us today. Every organization you can think of, from the mom and pop store to Apple or anybody else, is international. They're hiring virtually, they're hiring international. Gateway itself has our marketing team in Kenya and our computer team in India. So the need continues to be great, and the value, I think, critical. I took up the perspective called From the Kaleidoscope, and I looked back from an institutional perspective, having worked at US institutions since 1984, specifically in study abroad and international education at large, and looked at the growth and the change that occurred. I recall when I started, I believe the term my students said to me is that they were looking for a groovy experience. I think that was the word. And when I say that to my 22-year-old son, he has no idea what I'm talking about. And credit was something that was, a nice enhancement. That was a pretty elitist world. And since then, we've done a lot to diversify. And I'm very excited for that. And as the world has shrunk, as the opportunity to communicate across borders, as Sarah pointed out, exists, we have diversified the field in so many important ways. Engineers going abroad, students with disabilities going abroad, the things that were not happening when I started in the field are happening. And COVID certainly was a shock to the system, but I'm going to work with Obama's wise words and consider every spiral an opportunity. And I have seen that opportunity be realized through COVID. So our work to diversify and expand access has not changed. And that continues. And COVID has been an instigator for creative thinking. So virtual learning, the opportunity to integrate virtual learning into the classroom so that every student, whether they study abroad or not, has access to some form of virtual education. COIL has done a tremendous amount of work in this area. We have opportunities to do thoughtful short-term programs that are better supported than they were in the past when we were a little more laissez-faire about health and critical health and safety concepts. So for me, COVID certainly was a shock to the system, but also a very important instigator for new opportunities. There's some new virtual platforms coming out that are connecting international students and study abroad students to engage in conversations. There's some incredible innovative ideas and initiatives taking place that were inspired, if you will. If you want to put a positive spin on COVID, then that would be the inspiration that was already in the works and now I think really working on trying to mainstream. So I'm very excited for the future, and I will turn it over to Marty. Thanks all so much.
Right. Thanks, Heidi. That was great. I've known Heidi a few years of late, and it's been always terrific to collaborate with her in a very complimentary way. My thoughts, and I'll be just very brief. I have to reflect on the fact that I made a career change late in my life. In the first decade of the 2000s, I became Associate Director of Career Services at the Johns Hopkins School of Advanced International Studies here in Washington. And I quickly, within the first year, discovered that while I was working with the elite of the elite in terms of the student body from all over the world, highly experienced internationally, and yet they really hadn't yet made much meaning of all of that privileged experience. It led me to begin, ever since, for the past 15 years, writing more about the end game, the outcome of education abroad. And the fact that as our campuses have become far more diversified than all of us saw at the beginning of our careers, when campuses were mostly white, faculty were mostly white, students going abroad were definitely mostly white and women, and things have really turned upside down about that. But that reflection is foundational, I think, to where we find ourselves now, and led me to write more about the issue of linking international experience to student career development and employability in a very focused and intentional way, and not as a kind of sideshow ignored, but rather where we all were focusing on numbers and the metric as a measure of success on our campuses and in organizations to prove the worth and value of our efforts to send more American students abroad. So that's really where I came from in the chapter in my piece. I think one of the conclusions I had led to me saying that there needed to be development of a wider range of strategies for career integration to assist students making informed decisions about the type of education abroad experience that would be best aligned to support their academic program and their career aspirations. That's been a strong emphasis in my writing, in my speaking on campuses at NAFSA and so forth. And so I'll conclude there. It's been a privilege to be associated with all of you in the book. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And now we will turn it over to Lance.
Hello, everyone. I will start with it's something I've done in every email that I've sent to Tom. Tom, thank you so much for this opportunity. It's flattering. I'd like to talk briefly about theory, which is why I think I'm going last, because every time I use that word in public, Dr. Rhodes and Dr. Wolf just well up because they're bored to tears, and I don't like to see them crying in public. There have been various attempts to frame our profession theoretically. All of these you're probably familiar with. We could go back to Jim Citron, Lily Engel, Tony Ogden. But those theoretical approaches, I think, suffer from a criticism that we could apply to all of the social sciences, which is that they are wed to Newtonian metaphors, that everything, well, to use the term that was just used just a couple seconds ago, that everything is linear, that everything is about cause and effect, that everything is either or. Tom very appropriately started this conversation with the use of the term mythologies. The cultural critic Roland Barthes, in his seminal work Mythologies, said that there are spaces where we perhaps need to not be thinking about either or. We should be thinking about either and. And I think getting away from those Newtonian metaphors allows us to embrace that. Namely, if we start to look at quantum theory, we can get away from either or and start looking at things like either and, that maybe the entire study abroad experience is either and, that maybe we should not be thinking about the experiences as home versus away, or an immersion program versus an island program, or before study abroad and after study abroad. That if we think about terms like entanglement or even the dreaded Schrodinger's cat, that we should be addressing all of these things simultaneously. And I think quantum theory gives us the ability to do that. I think in many ways, quantum theory is the better metaphor for approaching what it is we're trying to accomplish as a profession, whether it's study abroad specifically or international education generally. The space that I do not go into in my humble chapter, in terms of all things quantum, is, of course, and this is, I think, a space I'd like to see opened up, the implication of quantum technologies. I'm sure everyone here does not want to have one more conversation about the impact of AI on higher education. I would assume we are all bored to death with that as well. But if we think of the ways that technologies have impacted our profession, the fax machine was going to be the end of study abroad, email was going to be the end of study abroad, social media. I think we need to more critically engage with quantum technologies to look at their impact, and having a better handle on what we mean when we use the word quantum means that we need to perhaps approach those issues proactively instead of retroactively. I will stop there.
Thank you so much. So at this time, I will turn it over to Tom, who will talk about his organization.
Thank you, Dr. Timmons. I won't take too long because I know we're running kind of late, and I can talk forever, certainly. This is just going to be the free promotional aspect of the program where I promote Abroadia. All I'll say is we are a very small study abroad provider based in the Finger Lakes region, concentrating on Cuba, Latin America, and now Spain. But one of the things that we like to think that makes us a little bit more unique is we find opportunities for teachers abroad to be able to take part in abroad opportunities here in the States. So we do have the Teachers program in Argentina, where we subsidize some teachers from the States to go to Argentina to share new pedagogies and new methodologies with them for 2 weeks. It's very highly competitive, as you can imagine. So if you're going to apply early. But one last thing I will say, and this I'm going to say, I know I have some friends from Brethren Colleges abroad who are here. I want to say hello. But one of the things I learned from Brethren Colleges abroad is to include study of peace and justice components into study abroad programs. And so we do offer seminars in Guantanamo, not in the military base, of course, but in the town of Guantanamo, to examine the U.S. role there and how it's affected Cubans and that community. So those are the things that we like to try and promote our programs. I think, as every one of our speakers have said, is engage students. It's not just about sending them abroad. Engage them. Make them think about peace and justice studies programs. In fact, I know about peace and justice. I'm going to ask a question to every one of you. If I say to you the Helsinki Declaration, do you know what that is? I'll spell it. It's well, actually no, I can't. It's a Greek word, but it's the Helsinki Declaration was signed in 2003, and it wedded the concepts of international education and human rights. However, in the 20 years since, the 20 plus years, it's completely disappeared. No one knows what's happened to it. No one knows what it is. And I think that is really the challenge that we have with study abroad and all the other connections it can make. I'm going over, so I'm going to stop now with my self-promotion. Sorry about that. And Dr. Timmons, I'll pass it back to you.
Thank you so much. So at this time, we heard from all our presenters, so I hope you enjoyed all the discussions that was presented today. And at this time, I will turn it over to Dr. Krishna Bista.
Thank you, Dr. Timmons. I truly appreciate everyone here in the room. I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge our amazing cover designer, Dr. Sahar Safari, for her amazing work. She has been instrumental for designing all the cover images. She's a scholar, also professor. Thank you so much. Also, I appreciate our co-editors, Dr. Roy Chan, Dr. Bo Zhang. Thank you. And as a senior vice president of the Star Scholars Network, I welcome all of you to the network, as well as to welcome to our upcoming Star Global Conference, which is hosted by or will be hosted by Kathmandu University in Kathmandu, Nepal. And Dr. Uttam Gali, in a few minutes, he's the president, will be talking about that in his remarks. The same time, I also take a moment to acknowledge our amazing team in the production, including Dr. Patricia Timmons from Harvard University, Dr. Chinwe Iguma, and Dr. Bojang, and Raj Bester, Roy Chen, and then all of our editors, series editors, reviewers. Thank you so much. Now over to you, Dr. Timmons, for the rest of the program.
Thank you so much. So at this time, I will see if there are any questions, please put them in the chat or feel free to open up your microphone and ask the questions. If not, then I'm going to place it over to Dr. Gwale for his closing remarks, and we can end this presentation. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Timmons. It's great to be here. Good morning, esteemed guests, scholars, educators, and advocates of global education. I couldn't find a better place to be. First of all, let me take a moment to salute to all veterans. Thank you so much for your service. I wasn't supposed to speak in this event, but I was lured to join to see some of the stars in the field. And I've been really enjoying the incredible family vibe here, even though we know we are in a scholarly discussion. And as a pleasant treat of surprise for me personally, I'm really delighted by the presence of Professor Tirtha Kania, who had joined us from Nepal. I had an opportunity to read your book and your forthcoming book. We're really excited. I think the next book launch will be a celebration of Professor Kania's book. Very insightful on higher education, shifting paradigms, and particularly as his experience from leading one of the largest universities in Nepal. Thank you so much. It's an honor. Definitely and privileged to stand before you today as we celebrate particularly the launch of an exceptional contribution to the field of international education, veteran educators, international education and study abroad, perspectives, insights, and practices. I was really pleased to go over some of the chapters. Congratulations. This is a groundbreaking work. It was brought to us by the accomplished editors, Thomas Mellington, Krishna Bista, Roy Chen, and Bo Zhang. and published by Star Scholars Press. It's a resource that reflects the rich, diverse, and ever-evolving landscape of global education. This book marks a significant milestone in our collective journey towards understanding and enhancing the study abroad experience. Through its engaging chapters, the book invites us on a reflective journey that not only celebrates the remarkable achievements in the field, but also critically addresses areas in need of attention. It underscores the vital role of senior international officers and champions a quantum approach to education abroad, offering readers a multidimensional understanding of international education. The book covers the evolution of study abroad programs, evolving narratives, and the impactful political shifts in technology. It integrates personal experiences with theoretical frameworks and historic perspectives, emphasizing intercultural competence and the intricate threads that form the tapestry of global education. As we delve into the invaluable resource, let us appreciate the dedication and expertise of the editors and contributors. This work not only enriches our knowledge, but also inspires us to continue advocating for a more inclusive, accessible, and impactful global education system. Thank you very much. Really appreciating the editors and contributors. I was taking some notes. I heard the very interesting, insightful perspective from Dr. Sora Friedman. I agree with you, we are one world. And Michael Wolff's reminiscence of then is powerful. He has very important scholarly acumen and great question, has it really declined? So there were no fields, only disciplines. That's amazing. I enjoyed the perspectives of Dr. Gary Rhodes and Lisa Loberg, providing a historic perspective. There has been a remarkable trajectory of growth, operations, and evolution of study abroad offices. Thank you. Gary, thank you so much for the recounting of the saga of field's evolution. Dr. Bista and I also had an opportunity to speak with Roger Ludeman a few weeks ago. He wanted to be associated with Star Scholars Network, and we are starting a small initiative with him. So that was really insightful. Thank you so much. Yeah, I agree with the recent emphasis on the sustainable development goals, and Olympic movements have really added much value in our field. I heard Joshua McKeown's metaphor of doors and walls is really powerful in describing how money, politics, and myriad other phenomena are impacting the field. That was really intriguing. Michael Smithy, powerful story. Emerging nomenclature was intriguing to me as an international educator. I did hear Heidi Sonneman and Martin Tillman's remarks. Changing narratives feel very well encapsulated in the powerful words of President Obama. Life is not linear. And Lance Kenny, very powerful and enlightening insights on the quantum theory techniques. So what I would like to do is definitely take the opportunity of the spiraling opportunities ahead of us, like what is offered by COIL. I would like to invite you all to immerse yourself in the profound insights offered by this book and join us in advancing the discourse on international and comparative education. Together, let us champion the cause of study abroad and intercultural competence, paving the way for a more connected and enlightened global community. Thank you for your presence here today. Let us celebrate the remarkable journey that this book represents in the field of higher education, in the field of global education. See you in Kathmandu, if not sooner. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for spending entire 75 minutes with us. We truly appreciate all of you. Have a great day. We'll invite certainly for the next book lunch. Thank you.
Thank you.